anybody under 18. I had my surgery at 24 and I was 100% convinced that this is what I wanted. I was 100% convinced I was a woman. But now things have changed and I can't go back and I have to live it with my choices, I guess. And but I also believe that I should have never been affirmed so quickly for the surgery and cleared for the surgery because I had all kinds of other mental issues. And right now I'm more depressed and sadder than I was before my medical transition. So that's my story. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you. Sorry if I'm a little distracted. I'm just getting everything going through, having to repost stuff and things like that. But Taftaj, if you could introduce yourself. And we are live on YouTube as of right now. I'm just sharing the links out.
Okay, yeah, my name is Taftaj, or April, if that's easier. I am known for having controversial opinions on the internet and occasionally posting sexy pictures as well on my Twitter. I enjoy debating politics with people and I'm looking to get into it. Yeah, based for Twitch as well.
All right, short and sweet. And last but not least, Blaire White. Oh, sorry. We gotta get Watson in at some point, but Blaire White, if you could introduce yourself. All right. Sinead, are you there? Maybe you could introduce yourself? Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, I was just going to say I'm the older counterpart to Chloe. I transitioned as an adult rather than a teenager. Very similar story. Transition was 100% certain that it was the best thing that I could do. And evidently I still ended up regretting it. So now I advocate for proper medicine and support and care for people with gender dysphoria. So not just Detrans, trans people as well. And I really just want the UK and elsewhere to get their shit together and provide care of their support.
All right, fair enough. Yeah, your internet's still a little bit choppy. Maybe it would be better if you cut your camera off, and then that way it won't be as much going through. But yeah.
I'll cut my camera off. Hold on.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes,
I'm
we can hear
sorry.
you.
I'm such a boomer with Discord. I don't usually use it. Am I good to intro myself now? Sorry.
Okay, I just love you, Blaire. That's all I just want to say. That.
Can I intro? I don't know if you guys can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Cool. So I'm a YouTuber and a political commentator. I've been on YouTube for about 6 to 7 years right now, and I guess I'm known for coming at the trans topic from the perspective of both someone who is trans, but also someone who is less than enamored with the ideology surrounding trans. I realized pretty much at the very beginning of my transition that what I was, which was someone who was experiencing gender dysphoria and learning to cope with it, was something quite different than the ideology. I started going to support groups at the start of my transition, and I realized very quickly that I was not on board with 90% of what was being said. So in my mind, I figured I would make videos and talk about it, and that's just kind of what I've been doing. And I've had the privilege of speaking to several of you guys here before. I've had Richie, ShapeShifter, on my podcast. Buck, of course, is my good friend, also on my show, and I respect everyone here, so I'm excited to get into it.
All right, awesome. So we had a bit of a rough start.
Yeah.
You know, it happens. Taftaj apparently was not banned for talking to Mr. Girl and made sure she did everything within that. She was banned for something else. But, you know, we continue on and we move forward. So I appreciate everybody. So, like I said before, I apologize, I'm losing a bit of my voice, but, you know, we're here for it no matter what. Like I said before, I have a series of like kind of softball and hardball questions because I really want to talk about some of those things that that we don't get to talk about with these issues. And I want to hear from perspectives from people that, you know, have lived these things. But starting with the memes, right? Starting with the question that I think is always on everyone's mind, thanks to Matt Walsh. I want to know what you guys think the definition of a woman is. Starting with Buck Angel.
You did not. Okay, a woman is an adult human female. Period. I look, for anybody out there, I believe in biology. You can believe whatever you want to believe in, but I believe in biology. I am a biological female, though I don't look like one anymore because I don't want to. I am a biological female, so it is an adult human female. I mean, I guess that's the only way to describe it because they keep creating all these false narratives around what a woman is. So I'm not as scared or frightened to tell you that. So that's what a woman is.
All right, fair enough. Chloe.
I mean, I don't really have much to add to that. I mean, a woman is just that, an adult human female. That's all there is to it. It's not
All
a
right,
good
fair
thing
enough.
or a bad thing. Well, I think it's a good thing, but it's not a bad thing, certainly.
How do you feel, Richie?
I can't. I was going to say I'm not an expert, but
I don't know. You've been many things. I don't know. You might be an expert, Richie.
for those who don't know, which is probably most people watching the stream, there was a case with Mermaids and LGBT Alliance where Mermaids were trying to strip LGBT Alliance of the charitable status through the Charity Commission. And they brought on several experts who all said they weren't experts. So if anyone asks, just say you're not an expert. It's the best way. Anyway, that's me.
All right, ShapeShifter, what do you think a woman is?
Adult human female, that's what it is. And if you asked me that question a year ago and somebody gave this answer, I would have lost my shit and I would have started attacking everyone. But I can't believe I'm saying it, but it is adult human.
All right, fair enough. I think Taftaj and I might be the ones that agree here. Taftaj, what do you think the definition of a woman should be?
Oh, interesting. I don't know what your position is, so I don't know if I'd agree with it. I just had a conversation with someone about this exact topic, and I would say that I err on the biological definition. But I also, the reason why I say err instead of like, this is absolutely it, is because I want to capture some nuance. And that's just that, like, I don't think that definitions are wholly like, that they always need to be the exact same. I think that you can have some nuance and you can include like gender roles or other things in the definition, depending on the conversation. And so I just say that, like, for most reasons, I talk about women and what I mean is adult human female. But I do want to capture some of that nuance, that it's not always so black and white.
Blaire White?
Yeah, I mean, I echo pretty much exactly what Buck said, but in reverse, per usual. And I will say that that's not without a level of nuance depending on the context of the conversation, right? So, like, if I'm in a real life scenario where I don't need to
Exactly.
clarify, like, my biological sex, I don't see any reason to go out of my way to say anything other than woman. But that's only in like an interpersonal, like, you know, context. And oftentimes I think what people get tripped up on is that we're here talking, usually the theme of these discussions is biology, and so it is very important to maintain an objective definition. But that also falls into the trap of leftists, which is like their main tool is language, right? So, you know, it's just, I agree with what Beck said in reverse, long story short.
And Sinead, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that.
No, you're not. I should. Well, yeah, of course, a woman is an adult human female.
Oh, gosh.
So just regurgitate what everyone else is saying. But what a woman is not is a feeling in your head. It's not makeup. It's not long hair. It's not nice nails. And it's not pretty dresses. It's adult human female, regardless of how feminine or masculine she is.
All right, so I guess I'm the most leftist person on this panel. I would say that that a woman is the socially constructed role that is inherent to the adult human female. I would say that what it describes is an adult human female, but that it is a gender role that people play. That it is socially constructed in some way. That certain cultures and societies change. Like what those window dressings are, but it's an attempt to describe the place in society that an adult human female has. And so I would say in certain contexts, it's, you know, if someone is playing all of those roles to the best of their ability, that they can't be a woman definitionally because it is inherent to a biological sex, but they are certainly playing the role of woman. And I wouldn't deny them their right to do that. And so like, that's kind of how I would go. Like, how do the rest of you feel about that? And now just open to the floor.
I have a good analogy here. So think of, you know, adopted parents, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have a couple who adopted a kid and, you know, for all intents and purposes, yes, those are their parents. If they need to go in like, you know, a medical scenario, it's going to be relevant information to say they're adopted, right? And anyone who's going around telling like an adopted kid intentionally, those aren't your parents because they're not biologically your parents, like that person's, you know, an a-hole, right? So I think there's a difference between interpersonal conversations and if we're talking about the actual issues, you know?
Yeah,
I think it's a great analogy.
I think that's perfect too, because like we use the word parent to refer both to like the caregivers and also like the biologically related people. And I think we do the same thing with women. We're like, people will use woman to refer to the cultural category and they'll use it to refer to like adult human female. And I think that's why like it's hard because we just need to disambiguate and be like, well, in this conversation when we're saying woman, we're meaning adult human female because that's what's relevant here, right? And
but with that being said though, I don't think that, you know, even on an interpersonal conversation level, everyone who just simply flicks a switch fits the role of a woman, right? Like if we're talking about just the actual role, it doesn't mean that I don't know, name a man, like Tom Cruise could announce tomorrow that he's a woman. That wouldn't be in any way true, right? Like on any level. So I think that there's something to be said about like how the goal of transitioning used to be integration into society. And there was never a reason to sit here and differentiate between a trans woman and a woman, really. But we're at the point now where the ideology has pushed it to such a point that, you know, if Tom Cruise can be a woman tomorrow, there's a discussion that needs to be had about what a woman is.
Well, I think what that is standards, right? Like we used to have this goal of integration because we had standards of like what it means to be a woman, what it means to fulfill that. And I think that like we've tried to erase all the boundaries on what it means to be a woman or a man because, you know, progressives don't want to exclude anyone. But I think what they miss with that is that like by erasing the boundaries, then like no one is anything and there's no use in the category at all.
Yes.
But I also want to say, you know, descriptors are very important. So a person who is born female is different than a person who wants to be a female that was not born female. So that's why I think it is important to say trans woman or trans man before you, and it does, and a trans person should no way, shape, or form feel insulted by that because that's actually what you are. So I really do think the problems arising from this "what is a woman" thing is that we're not willing to, the trans, specifically the trans community from my point of view, is not willing to take on that descriptor as if it is a negative
bad word.
Descriptor. Yeah, it is not a negative descriptor.
Real quick, Shifter of Shapes, if you could mute yourself when you're not speaking because you're picking up some people's audio. But if you want to say something, be my guest now.
Yeah, I'm just going to say that if I was as based as Buckers or Blaire is at the beginning of my transition, I would have never went through the whole bottom surgery because I live in Massachusetts. It's kind of like a California on East Coast, right? So I was full on convinced that surgery going to make me a woman. I no longer have to carry the trans label because I was internalizing transphobia because I didn't want to carry that label. I just wanted to be a woman and move on with my life. Had I known that I cannot transcend my biology and I will always have to carry that distinguisher, I would have never subjected myself to any of those surgeries. So I think it's important to teach next generations that if they want to transition, that's fine, but they should not forget about their biology. There will always be a biological man or a biological woman. They can do body modifications, grow their hair, wear makeup, whatever, but they're not going to be, we don't have technology to actually change you into full-on woman if you were born a man.
But you know, I want to tell you, we never thought that. I remember I transitioned 30 years ago. We never thought that. I always knew I wasn't going to be a man, if that, you know what I mean? I wanted to look like a man. I want to be around. But we actually knew it's this new ideology that is putting this idea that we are men and women. And
if that's your goal, you'll always fail because you'll always
yes,
come
that's
up short.
right. That's right, because I proved it that you can. I don't have what we call bottom surgery. Everybody in the world knows that I have a vagina. But that being said, I mean they literally do. Everyone in the world see my naked body. So that being said, it has never made me not feel less of a type of man I am, if that makes sense. And I think it's so important that people understand that this just started, this pushback of what is a woman. And the trans community, we were always very aware of who we are and what we do. I mean, look at Blaire and I are pretty much the same but opposite in male and female. And we walk the world perfectly fine. And people don't necessarily have a problem. No one comes up to us and says to us, are you a man or a woman? Because we knew what we needed to do in order to survive in this world as trans people and to walk the world so people on some level respect what we're doing.
If I could interject for just a moment, I think also one of the things that we're maybe pushing up against is that humans kind of, we do these Bayesian analyses, like just kind of out of a force of habit, right? Where we look at secondary sexual characteristics, we look at makeup, we look at hair, we look at the way someone talks, the way they dress, right? And if like enough of those things are kind of in the same category, I think we kind of like make assumptions based off of those categories. And I think maybe what is kind of, and we'll get into this a little bit later, but I think what is maybe striking so many people is that the older generation of like transsexuals, if you will, they understood that they had to wear that window dressing and be all of that. And there's this kind of new thing that says, well, everything is a kind of an amorphous, socially constructed, everything can be deconstructed. And it's like, but our brain says from from just habit, our brain looks at reality and says, that's a man in a dress. Like that's not a trans person.
Well, here's the thing. You're absolutely correct in everything that you just said. Pronouns that you use for a person, like it's a subconscious registry of their secondary sex characteristics. It's not a conscious choice. I mean, obviously in some certain specific scenarios it is, but in reality, walking through the world, it's like you look at someone and your brain tells you. You don't sit there and make it a thing, right? And that's what I realized very, very early on. So I was like, okay, that means that it's on me. How could it possibly be on the other person when they don't know me and they have no investment in me? They're like, working at a gas station, But then you have these other people that, it actually feeds into their ideology, which is victim-based, to have this like sort of ideology that is completely at odds with real life because they'll always meet that opposition and they'll always have something to cry about.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's demanding other people bend to your own self-perception. And in some ways, like intuit what it is without you really making an effort to show them. And I had this exact same realization because like I was in high school and I was wearing girls' clothes and people would refer to me with like male pronouns. And every time they did, I just thought, okay, well, I'm just going to try to present more female. Like that, I'm going to really look at what I can do to fix my circumstance rather than just like deferring that responsibility onto other people. And ultimately, I think that's really bad for your mental health because you make other people the masters of how you feel rather than having agency.
Well, leftist ideology is based on deferring, the responsibility onto someone else. It's their entire ideology from top to bottom. It's always, it's your problem, it's not mine. And at some point, the buck does have to stop somewhere, no pun intended. And it has to be with yourself. Like, you just get your own shit together and then you can live your life and be peaceful and happy. But these people don't want that.
Chloe and Richie, did either you, I was going to ask you to step in, but go ahead.
Yeah, so one of my biggest problems while transitioning, I think, was that I believed that I was, for most of it, I believed that I was actually somehow male, even if I wasn't physically. The theory of like brain, of the brain being sex was a big part in that. I believe that somehow I had a more masculine brain. I had a male brain and a female body, and that was what caused me to feel dysphoria and want to transition to male.
All right, so I promised you guys that I was going to ask questions that were dangerous and that I was going to say spicy things that don't go out anywhere.
Before you go on with that, let me just come in.
Go ahead.
because I've purposely just been letting people speak. There's been a few things that I disagree with. Unfortunately, I don't have my pen and paper to note them all down, but there's one I want to pick on particularly, which was something that's April, I believe, said. I don't know, Taftaj. I'll call
I
it
can
April.
change my name as well.
Yeah, so something that April said, which was that the sex stereotypes have been expanded, and I disagree. I think they've been more constricted. She's left. I'll wait for her to rejoin.
Yeah, I think she's been having internet issues.
No, it was just she said something about her name, but you can just change that in Discord. She didn't have to do that.
Me?
Anyway.
I'm still here.
Oh, no, you're still there. You just change your name. God, I am...
Yeah.
No. I'll not say the words. But you're all thinking it, right? Yeah. Okay. I think we've lost Sinead. Sinead's internet's just been a bit crappy, as we saw earlier. But it was this whole idea that, this whole liberal sensibility that that the expansion of male and female has led to this. It absolutely hasn't. It's the inverse. What's happened is we've said that if you're a boy who wants to be a bit more feminine or wants to engage in certain stereotypical female interests, then that must mean that you are some sort of woman or a trans woman. And it's the inverse for girls who are a little bit tomboyish and whatnot. So I fundamentally disagree that this has opened up the sexes, and this is just a result of the expansion of gender. It's actually the opposite. We've completely constricted ourselves to more labels and more boundaries and more rules, and that's causing people with just normal teenage expression to lead on to medicalization, and it just doesn't stop at teenagers too. It happens to young and emerging adults who get captured by this idea too, that they are less than perfect and need to change their bodies. And that's why I fundamentally disagree with that bit. So, sorry.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what you're hitting on in a way is this like sex stereotyping that people do, right? Where people will say that like, well, clearly I'm a woman because like I walked into shop class with like giant prosthetic boobs, that kind of thing, which really reduces like womanhood purely to image. And so I think that like when we talk about these things, it's important to recognize how people kind of strip the meaning from what it is to be a woman down to like the visual or the sexual. And we can like acknowledge that and critique it. But I think that like personally, I would also critique the viewpoint that like there are no standards for what it means to be a man or a woman. And I think that like that's what I was trying to get at when I was speaking earlier, is the idea that like you really, if you want to be seen as a woman, you don't have to put in like anything to do that. You can just make those demands on people to see you as a woman. And that's something that I think is just like not a reasonable approach. And I think that like if you want to be perceived a certain way, if you want to live as a man, as Buck does, which is like, take on this masculine appearance, then I think that like that responsibility to do so is on you and not on demanding other people conform to your viewpoint.
That's right, my friend. Thank you for saying that. Passing. So what the trans community has always called passing, which is something that I and Blaire, are not going to speak for you, Blaire, but what I do is completely try to make myself look as masculine as possible so that I've never even been misgendered really, even before my transition. So that being said, it is upon me. It is not up to you. And that's what I think is happening now. All of a sudden, this newer trans community is expecting the whole world to bow down to their demands of being whoever they are. And that won't work. You cannot. I know that from my own experience. I've never demanded anything from the world. I've said, this is who I am. If you don't like it, fine. I'll go over here or I'll go over there. That's how I've navigated the world for pretty much my whole transition. It wasn't easy early on. We didn't have these kinds of things, right? So I got so much. I mean, gosh, the kids today are such a bunch of babies. Are you kidding me? If they would have had to live 30 years ago, they would have never made it. So that being being said, I think it's so important that people understand a person like me makes an effort to look and dress and walk or be that. I know damn well who I am. I know 100% I'm not a man. I am a transsexual man who makes myself look this way in order for the world to see me as male. And it works out perfectly fine. And nobody has a problem with me. So I've proved that. I've proved a certain part of, I've actually disproved those people who are saying, you know, the world hates us, and no, that's not true. I think they're coming to it in a much different way than the way I come to it.
But here's
But
the other thing,
Taftaj, could you respond a little bit though to the criticism of the expansion of gender, at least in terms when we're talking about children or adolescents, and this idea that like playing with androgyny or playing with tomboyish behavior or things like that, that certain individuals within education, within the medical community, etc., have taken that and labeled that and attached that to a trans identity when it used to be that we understood that. Like, I think a great example of this actually might even be Angelina Jolie's child, right? Came out as John, was socially transitioned as John. They didn't do any androgen therapy or hormone replacement therapy, and recently she has retransitioned or detrans or subsisted to Sophie. And so it's like, like maybe some of that, like a little that nuance that I think Rishi was trying to pull out.
Yeah, I'll address that really quickly. I just off of what Buck said, I think that what's important, Buck, that what you're doing is that you're presenting how you want to present, but you're not then therefore going to people and saying that, like, because I look a certain way, that makes me a man or a male or whatever, right? And I think that's the important distinction here, is because like there are some people who like will present a certain way and then use that to justify a certain ideological position. And I think that's really the problem, is like when you tie that like presentation to the ideological position. And I would say that like what you do is good is you present how you want to authentically, but don't make that next step, which I think is more the problem. Okay, so that's the one thing. The other thing is this like labeling and really medicalizing what is basically normal human behavior, which is like children who are going to be gender nonconforming, and a huge number of children who are gender nonconforming end up stop being gender nonconforming as they get older. And I think that like this is like so many other things where, because we're not allowed to challenge or to question this, position, it just gets more and more extreme, because people can push it to a little bit more extreme, a little bit more quote unquote transpositive, and no one questions that. But if you try to pull back on that, no one lets it happen. And so I think that's how you get these children who are just being normal children, and then suddenly they're being told that like, oh, if you don't take hormones, you'll try to kill yourself later down in life. And there's no evidence for that. And I think that that's really scary, quite frankly.
Is that satisfactory, Richie?
Man, I kind of feel like we still haven't answered the original statement, which was regarding the stereotypes and how they expanded, and how I critique that to say that actually that tightening is causing more people to transition because they're misinterpreting it. And then yourself and Buck went into a dialogue about passing, and I do feel like you do have your own implicit bias in this, in the sense that you feel like because you pass, you're somehow separated from these pulls and issues that brought you to transition in the first place. Because I felt exactly the same as you did a year or two ago, right? And that's just the reality of it. All the Detrans males in our group, in the Detrans, we were all very, very sure of a transsexuality, and to the sense that most of us never called ourselves women. That we never called ourselves female or male. It was just we are truly transsexual people. I went through umpteen years of therapy. I've been diagnosed 9-10 times. But even today, I still don't think that I am actually, because I believe it is a concept. So to answer your question, Scott, no, I don't think it's been adequately answered. Sorry, April.
Okay. I mean, maybe we can try one more shot at this, and then we can just
Yeah,
move on.
I'm not like having any problems understanding you. I just think you've got to have a bit over intellectualizing the answer rather than just going straight to the
Well,
point.
tell me if I'm understanding, because maybe I'm misunderstanding you. I think what you are hitting on is that certain people engage in like gender nonconforming, or if they're AFAB, masculine behavior. And because that fits into a certain stereotype, we encourage them to transition as a result of that. And in doing so, we actually like reinforce the idea that masculine behavior for AFAB people is somehow like needing medicalization and therefore deviant, and therefore we reinforce the stereotypes, right? Is that what you're saying with this?
That's right.
Okay, perfect. And so I think what I'm just trying to say is that like it's important to separate these things a little bit, where like just because you're a gender nonconforming does not necessarily mean that you will benefit from medical transition. And it certainly doesn't mean that we need to sell people who are gender nonconforming the idea that it is a death sentence if they don't transition. So I think that we can acknowledge that. And the other thing that I think we can acknowledge is that like when Buck presents in a stereotypical way, but he doesn't claim that that makes him a male, I think that that does actually, it doesn't reinforce certain stereotypes, because he's accepting that, look, you can be AFAB and you can present in a masculine way, and that's okay. So I think that that's why I tried to hit on like his identity and the stereotypes. That was my best way of, answering that. Maybe that gives a little bit more color or nuance to it. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Shifter really wants to jump in.
Okay, yeah.
Shifter really wants to jump in.
Yeah.
But then I wanna if you have any final thoughts, Blaire, Buck, or Chloe, we'll do it, and then I want to move on to another question, because I got some hard ones.
I don't agree with April that we shouldn't try to push people who are just exhibiting gender nonconforming behavior as like this pill. Like if you don't transition, you're gonna kill yourself. That's a very dangerous narrative to push. So yeah, I completely agree with her. And I also feel like people should be able to masculinize if they want to, or feminize safely, if that's how they want to present, that's how they want to present, but we also have to make sure that it's not dangerous for them to take certain drugs and do certain surgeries. Thank you.
Buck, you said that you wanted to add something real quick?
All I wanted to add was this. I transitioned at the age of 30. So I had lived a full life, and I actually really did try to live in the female space. I identified and lived in the gay female space for probably 15 years. I really did try. Not to say that it's just my story. So I just really want people to understand I transitioned at an older age, when I really did have a lot of life before me, and why I really do resent this new community pushing children into a space that isn't necessarily 100% for them. And I don't necessarily believe trans kids exist. I think they're kids who are dealing with stuff like I did, and probably all of us here did. So I just want to say that I really made a choice at 30 to really make this choice and move forward with it. And I have never, ever looked back. It's been an incredible experience for me.
So real quick, before we get on to the next question, Chloe has taken me to task because I have accidentally said subsisting, which makes no damn sense. It's desistance or desisting. I appreciate the correction. We have live fact checkers here, boys. So I promised some spicy questions. I'm going to move on to one of the hardballs. Now in these, whenever I say something is a hardball, if you want the question passed because you don't want a public statement on these, I get that. I respect that. And there's no shame on not wanting to have a public statement, as many of you are public figures on some of these questions.
These better be good.
Question. So, science in many ways has been taken over by the culture war. There's a lot of bad methodology in many of these studies. I've seen studies recently that show where they track desistance rates 1 or 2 years later, even though some research seems to suggest it's 4 or 7 years, depending upon your gender or we'll say your sex here, to be more specific. But I've also seen right-wingers utilize studies that say that, 90 or 99% of people desist when they're really talking about someone that made a claim once or that went to one therapy appointment. And so it seems like there's this war over the science. And what I see in this is none of the right questions are being asked. None of the things that really should be being studied are being studied. And instead, we have pseudoscience that is, ignores comorbidities. But then, of course, the right will look at studies that do show comorbidities, and they won't look at the fact that those, even when you account for comorbidities, that some transition shows slightly better efficacy in the short term. And so my question is all of this science junk? Is there, a certain field or, critical theory that has infected things so that some of the science is a problem? And the other questions adding on to this is this an efficacious treatment for some people or for a majority of the people? Or is it that single-minded people that have OCD, autism, ADHD, depression, anxiety, and like to focus on things are sold a solution that gives their life meaning and purpose for a period of time that they focus strongly on? And eventually, as they begin to pass and as that goal gets closer and closer, they begin to realize that they've never fixed any of the underlying issues. And so, yeah, Blaire, if you want to go first, we can go in opposite direction this time. Go right ahead, Blaire.
Yeah, so I wholeheartedly agree with what you said about the utilization of trans and detrans people by the left and the right, and how you're sort of left to your devices to figure out, okay, do I trust the crazy fucking SJW activist study, or do I trust the St. Thomas's Christian? You know what I mean? It's like you choose between one religion or the other, basically, to get information on this stuff most of the time. And so a lot of the science is junk because it's ideologically driven from both sides. But what makes it very interesting to me is it's very difficult to see both sides as equal when it comes to this topic, because you have one side that completely ignores most of the people in this room, the detrans people, and then the other side, it's like when it comes down to it, people love to pretend as if they care about trans and detrans people. Most of them really don't. Most of them only see the entire topic and our lives, all of us, as a means to political purpose, right? So that's always important to keep in mind. And that's why I think it's so important to actually have conversations, across these boundaries that are supposedly there between, trans and detrans, how I can't talk to Chloe, or I can't talk to Richie, I can't talk to Shape. And it's really the content that we've all been making together that I think is really, changing the tides and sort of steering things in the right direction. So that's what I think about the first question, about the science. And then the second question was, is transition truly something that's beneficial? Obviously, there's a lot of gray area here, right? You literally see both sides of the coin within this very chat. And it's not so pretty to say, and people get so caught up in this, but transition is absolutely not right for even some trans people. I'm sorry, if you are a 6'9" linebacker and you want to become Linda tomorrow, you're free to do that. And you're free to go to whatever extent that you can and will to get there, right? But I think anyone who tells that 6'9" linebacker, yes, you can go pass as a woman, is kind of a really bad person. Like, how dare you lie to this person, right? So I think that there's a lot of nuance to be taken into account before you transition, as to like if this is going to work for you on a practical level, on a spiritual level, on a financial level, all of that, and I think that when it's all shoved into this box of just like trans women are women and trans men are men, how is any of that nuance going to fit? The box is too small. So the answer is, for some people yes, and for some people no.
ShapeShifter.
I agree with Blaire that a lot of the science seems to be junk because it's all kind of biased, and no matter what study pops up, the other side immediately jumps onto debunking it. And honestly, when I detransitioned, I left one ideology, but immediately another ideology was trying to sweep me up. Like all of us detransitioners are getting messages from hardcore Christians trying to turn us to religious people, and it's like, but it would be swapping one ideology for another. So it's like, it's so hard to stay level-headed and pick what's right, what's real anymore, you know? I personally do have comorbidities, you know, I do have OCD, I do have borderline personality disorder, I have all kinds of issues. I have no freaking clue how I was ever approved for all the surgery, thinking that like it was somehow gonna solve my issues. Like it didn't. And I feel like for a while it just made me focus on my transition and on passing, so it took my attention away from other issues. Like, but at the end of the day, like those issues never went away. I still have to work on them, you know. And I feel like now being in the transitioner community and knowing a lot of trans people as well, I feel like a lot of times, I'm not saying that goes out to everybody, but a lot of times trans identity is covered up with some kind of childhood trauma or other issues. And that's why people are so protective of their trans identity, because when you come for that identity, you're kind of coming for their trauma. And that's why a lot of trans radical activists are so hardcore, so aggressive, you know. And it's like, I was like that for years. If somebody told me that I was anything less than a woman, I was ready to fight. But now I realize, like, I still have all my issues to deal with. I saw my therapist today, you know, it never goes away. I feel like a lot of people, especially I can speak on M2F, you know, they start transitioning, they immediately get attention from men. A lot of them get caught up in sex work. The money is good, you know, and money can improve a lot of things, but it doesn't solve your issues. It doesn't heal trauma, you know. So eventually you have to deal with it, you know, it's just a matter of time, you know. And so, yeah, that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Can I jump in really fast? I'll make it brief.
I want to. Well, no, I want to get everyone's initial statement, and then we'll open it up.
Okay.
Richie, go ahead. I don't want to get too far away from the question. Richie, go ahead.
To answer the question, no. I think the science is built on extremely weak foundations, and if you poke at it just a little bit, it all falls down. If you want to have an example of this, you just need to look no further than the meta studies, such as the Cornell, where they've taken the Cornell University, where they've taken, I think it was like 78 studies, and some of these were like online questionnaires based off like 6 months or 12 months follow-up over, you know, and some of the methodology is absolutely frightening. And when you pick at it and you tear that to pieces, you realize that the basis of this is pretty shocking. I feel like the solution to that is an international long-term look at the data that exists, because one of the issues that we have, especially in the United Kingdom, is when somebody changes their gender changes their sex on the NHS records, they get a new number. So getting this data is extremely difficult because it's also marked as gender sensitive. And it's not just the UK who behaves this way in terms of how they protect the data. So even if we do long-term study follow-ups, we're going to have to work out a way to get the data that's been purposely segmented and fragmented away from us. And also we've got issues where I can't remember which study it was, but they had something like a 36% drop-off no response rate from people who wanted to take part in the study, like on a long-term follow-up. And that, you know, that's a large number of people in a study to just randomly want to jump out, especially if the questions are going to be stuff like, are you happy as being trans, when, you know, about 30% may desist or whatever. But in terms of the comorbidities, the information is actually there. It's just not labeled in the way that you would expect it. So if you were looking for comorbidities for trans, you will never find a study like that. But if you look into, types of OCD and trans OCD, you will find studies on that. But they will be very, very reluctant to make the link, because that will get them finished in their field. And it happened with the Swedish study. You know, the Swedish study where they talked about how suicidality increases if versus like normal population controls as somebody transitions. But that could also be down to other factors, right? But it also said that surgery makes it significantly worse. And when that came out, there was no end of rebuttals by the authors in Huffington Post and all that sort of thing because they got vilified. So even when you do try to do the science, you get absolutely... It's really hard, and I think we need a international, unbiased effort that doesn't have any of the existing players involved. That's how you fix this. But no,
Fair
the
enough.
science is shit.
All right. Chloe?
Yeah, I think that the lack of proper data, proper research on this is exactly the problem here, especially we're going to need better data on this, especially if we're going to be treating kids with gender affirming care. I mean, not only that, but they also outright lied to patients. They lied to me. They lied to my parents. My concern was never I never thought in a million years that I would regret any of this, but so I never questioned that. I never asked the medical professionals about that. But my parents did. They were concerned with how quickly I was going through with my medical transition, and they were like, they asked before I decided to go on hormones. My mom and dad, they were like, do you guys not think that she's going a little too quickly with this? Shouldn't we be waiting a little bit before she goes the medical route? And they're like, oh no, children already know their gender identity by a pretty young age. She knows what's best for herself. And then they cited the suicide rates. They're basically like, if you don't allow your daughter to go through this, then she might kill herself. Would you rather have a dead daughter or a live son? And they, before I had my surgery, they were like, they told my mom basically like, these procedures have a very low regret rate, like less than 1%, which I just don't think is true, because I mean, I know this is anecdotal really, but almost immediately after my my mastectomy, like once the euphoria of it all was all gone, maybe by like several weeks or maybe like a month at most, I started to feel grief. I couldn't really identify the feeling at the time because I was so entrenched in this. I was so deep into the ideology and transitioning itself that it was just so hard to just even fathom that this could have been that it was any of it was a mistake. And a young detransitioner who reached out to me actually has had kind of the same experience. She's barely 7 months post-op, and she's already feeling just awful about having had that going under the mastectomy. And that's another thing. She was a minor when she underwent this. She was 16 or 17. I was 15. The problem is when they say things like that, they're often using data from studies conducted on adult patients 18 and up.
Well, I appreciate you sharing. Thank you. Thank you. If we could move on to Buck Angel, but honestly, just thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
People need to hear this stuff, even if it's hard to listen to.
It's hard to talk about.
It's it actually makes me want to cry. So, I appreciate you all, the detransitioners, speaking up. It's so important. It just is. It really makes me feel so happy to hear you. Not your story, it's horrifying, but the fact that you have, enough. I don't even know what I want to call it, because it's a difficult thing that you're doing, and I appreciate it so much. But that being said, courage. I mean, there's so many words. I was going to say balls. That's just me. That being said, I want to say that, science is shit. Whoever said that, the science is shit, because I can tell you 30 years ago, the things that were happening to me after I started taking testosterone are happening still to young trans men. And I'm like, what? These are the things I have been talking about for the 30 years of my transition, putting it out, all over the last 20 years. I've been putting all my health problems all over the internet, and trying to get people to study my experience of, because I'm one of the oldest trans male out there, and the longest running biological female on testosterone. I have so much in my body but they don't do the studies. So how come young trans men are getting the same problems I had 20 and 30 years ago? That says to me they don't care. There are no studies. It's a bunch of crap. And both sides are they're literally using everything against this side and left side and the right side, and everyone's just like totally demolishing us. And I've always said this is a private affair. We should be doing this in our own space. We should be talking about this with each other. We should be helping each other move forward. We should be, really encouraging these studies, but we're not. In our own community, we're not even encouraging studies. We're not encouraging talking about the problems. And for example, I know a lot of trans men who've had bottom surgery, which is, for anybody who doesn't understand, that's getting a penis put on. I know so many trans men who've had so many problems with these surgeries. They don't talk about it. They don't put it out there. So how do we actually know what's happening in our community when our own community doesn't even want to help or share or talk about these problems? So, I think we are in a huge mess. And to bring children into this when we don't even understand how it's affecting adults is disgusting, and says to me that it's not about saving lives, it's about money. And I will say it. I don't care what anybody says to me here. I will say it. There is some money attached to this. There is some serious disgusting behavior, and there's no integrity involved in trans medicine or transitioning. To me, it's all about numbers, and that's where we stand. That's how I see it, and where we stand today.
All right, last but not least, Taftaj, and don't worry, Blaire, I'll bring you right in as soon as we open up.
I'll try to keep it short. I got in a lot of trouble because I pointed out on Twitter that a lot of the evidence for the benefit of HRT or surgery is pretty weak. And if you look at these systematic reviews, they will say that. They'll say that due to methodological concerns and sample size concerns and all of these concerns of bias, we're going to say that the evidence is weak. And I think it's really hard to tell what exactly is true and what isn't true, especially because you look at some of these journals that are publishing these papers, and there's a constant problem of, false positives and issues with finding rigorous enough data. I think the one thing that we can all agree on is that there definitely needs to be more studies done. I think it's really tragic that we don't see them. And the fact that we don't I think if anything does indicate an unwillingness to really probe for fear of what might be found. And so I think it's important to find that data. Personally, my reviewing of the literature, I think it seems to indicate that there's a small positive benefit of HRT, but again, it's pretty weak. And if we're going to give people medicines that are going to change their body permanently, we need to have better than just weak evidence. We need to have strong evidence. So yeah, I'll keep it at that.
Yeah. So Blaire, I know you wanted to jump in.
Yeah, when Shape was talking about all the other issues that he had that were ignored, I've kind of been thinking a lot about what it takes to transition and have, a net positive result and be able to live life and be healthy and be happy and successful, etc. And what kind of is there for the people that, listening to Chloe's story, it's just so gut-wrenching. And part of why it's so gut-wrenching is because as I'm listening to it, I'm comparing it to, my own journey 7 months after HRT, a year in, 3 years in, and it couldn't be more opposite. And so it's really scary that people can have such opposite experiences with this, right? And I think that, not saying this is the situation with Chloe, but with a lot of people I've talked to in the detrans community, there is this hatred of their birth sex, and you see it with how, intensely activists defend themselves and their genders, right? I'm noticing that the people who end up having like negative results with transition, a lot of the times they're not addressing like a hatred of their birth sex or an issue with their homosexuality. I think that you see a lot of this in the Middle East. Rich and I talked about this when I had him on my show. In the Middle East, when they give gay men sex changes, it's called, barbaric and bigoted and whatever. And here it's called love and tolerance, even if they're like 13 years old, So I think that you have to like just accept every bit of what you are, even if you want to change some of it. Like I never stopped loving or appreciating or acknowledging the fact that I was male because I was trans. And that for whatever reason, I knew that at the very start. And I just wish everyone kind of had that mindset.
The floor is open, ladies and gentlemen.
It was Blaire.
I'm gonna add on. Oh, you
Go
go
ahead.
first.
Yeah, I agree with Blaire. I definitely had some internalized androphobia because of my childhood trauma. I just saw men as source of danger and pain. So I guess I didn't want to be a man. So I guess I checked out. I always saw women as more nurturing and kind. So I wanted to be one of them. So that's why I guess I didn't even realize that I had internalized androphobia. Sometimes it just takes time to grow up and just realize who you are. I feel like it's a journey of self-discovery. And making permanent decisions so early in your timelines, that could really fuck you up. So it's like, it's really bad idea to have permanent body modification. And oftentimes when I try to bring it up, people say, well, do you want to ban tattoos now as well? And from what I've heard, there were studies on tattoos as well. Like if you give enough time, 90% of people who got that tattoo gonna regret it if you give it like 10 years, 20 years.
Right.
And here we're talking about permanent body modification. Like that's completely insane to me how I signed off on everything. Like it's insane. I don't think I was
Fuck you. I love my tattoos.
No, but
I think there's a difference between tattoos though. And that's like tattoos aren't being massively pushed by like a medical establishment. And so like if you take the responsibility personally and are like, I'm gonna get a tattoo, I'm gonna suffer the consequences, like you're totally responsible for that. But like if as soon as other people start being entered into the picture and they're telling you you need to do it, I think that's when it gets iffy.
Tattoos don't sterilize you.
Yeah. I want to.
Insurance, so I felt like more safe. I felt like it wasn't deemed medically necessary. It made me feel safer. I felt like it was an actual medical procedure. People wore white robes, so it made me feel safe. But it was all fake, because people were just like, after my insurance money, they didn't have my best interest. They never checked on me years later. So, thank you. Sorry.
All right, so let me go to Chloe and then to Richie. I believe in you, Chloe. You're muted. Sorry, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry.
It's okay.
I accidentally just. I kind of missed like the last few seconds. What are we?
Well, you were chiming in. You were chiming in. I wanted to let you speak.
Yeah, so I was gonna add on to what Buck was saying earlier, how there's. Even within like trans spaces, there's not like a whole lot of discussion on like the, everybody's always talking about the, like the euphoria, the happiness that socially transitioning or medically transitioning brings, but nobody ever talks about like the side effects or the ramifications for like your physical health that can come up. And honestly, it's hard to talk about. I mean, with these studies, there's so little patient follow-up, and honestly, it's not hard to see why. It's difficult to talk about, especially with your providers, the people who brought you into the situation in the first place. I understand that for a lot of people, it's kind of difficult to just bring up, and even for those who do. In my experience, actually, I brought this up to my therapist, my gender specialist, even my surgeon, and I found that they were generally pretty unhelpful. I mean, my surgeon, I told him like I detransitioned, I regretted this, I don't feel like I should have been allowed to do this at the age that I did, and that I'm still 2 years after the fact, I'm still having some pretty serious side effects. And he actually gave me advice. It kind of felt like he was just like rushing me through the appointment, almost kind of nervous. And he gave me advice that temporarily made my problem worse. Another thing that I want to say though is that it's I know that as difficult as it is, even if you don't think that it'll help yourself personally, I think that as detransitioners, once you're able to like speak up about it and I guess like be a better advocate for yourself, once you're healed up enough, it's kind of your responsibility to come clean to like your medical provider about detransitioning so that we can help provide that proper data.
So just to pick that apart just a little bit to make it more clear, what you're saying is that there's this massive issue with capturing certain levels of data because the very people that you trusted that gave you what I would call, and people can challenge me on this if they want, I would just call it medical fraud and a lack of informed consent, that you no longer have any trust for these people. And then those are the same people that are supposed to garner data and research from you as a detrans individual. And so many people that are detrans, they have such a deep mistrust for the medical community, for the gender specialists, for their endocrinologists, et cetera, that data isn't being kind of captured because of that mistrust.
I feel like that's a big part of it, yes. And also the bias of these healthcare providers. I wouldn't be surprised if that plays a role in this as well.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even think about that methodologically, but Richie,
I mean, they withhold data
in.
from their own they withhold information from their own patients.
Yeah, fair enough. Richie?
Yeah, those are all really good points, Chloe, and I don't want to take away from them. I don't think my next point will, but I want to talk about responsibility and the perception of responsibility. So often the favorite tagline in the trans community is take responsibility when they come to me, and I'm just like, this is a very interesting thing to say to me as a trans person. If a trans person says this to me, because I kind of feel like, if that's the case, do you then have to take responsibility for being misgendered, for not looking the part or whatever than that? Why is it only that I have to take responsibility when it doesn't quite fit your narrative? But accountability and responsibility are the underlying issues here. We've got the community itself is quite immature and quite state reliant. They want to be looked after. A lot of them have got very weird ideals about capitalism and communism because they don't work and they can't get a job, right? And I'm sorry, it's just how it is. And it's so ironic that they'll turn around and go to a detransitioner that you're not taking responsibility. But this is taking responsibility to stand up and say there are issues. I was hurt by my experience. I take the bits that I can account for, but I want people to answer for their bits now too, right? That's taking accountability. That's being responsible. But yeah, accountability and responsibility.
And I think that when medical institutions start making suggestions to people, and when those suggestions are phrased in the most extreme language possible, that makes medical institutions partially responsible for the results. And I think that that's kind of what's missing, is that maybe in a perfect world, it would just be everyone's individual responsibility and people would have perfect agency and rationality to decide on their own. But we don't live in that world. And we live in a world where there is a lot of pressure on one side to do a certain thing. And I think that's when the responsibility breaks down as a metaphor, and you start having to look at people are influencing others, these scenarios.
Well, I just want to jump in here real quick. Doctors are starting to speak up. I see them. They are starting to say things. Now that being said, again, I'm the old fart here, but I'm going to tell you, back in the day, my doctors were amazing, and I was there first. Both of my doctors, my endocrinologist and my surgeon, they had never dealt with a trans male before, and they treated me with such amazing love and respect. And, I feel like it was like that early on back in the day because it wasn't inundated. We didn't have 5 million people transitioning at one time. So maybe there was a different way of thinking back then, but I have to tell you that I had such amazing healthcare when they didn't even understand what they were doing on some level, but they kept really close eyes on me, and I really believe that's why I had.
You were a patient,
but
you were a patient and not an ideological weapon.
That's right. So I want you to see that. I want you to see the difference.
That happens. That happens right now. I mean, if you want to add in all the appointments I had at the gender clinic, therapy, psychiatric, voice training, the whole lot, I had over 150. And I don't think that they were, I don't think like they were mean or rush, or like, when I say they weren't rushing us through, I mean, I was getting asked at the psychiatric appointment every time if I wanted surgery, but it was very much all, they were quite nice, and they did seem like they were looking at my issues of me being trans. But when I took a step back, I realized that they weren't looking at the comorbidities. And that was the huge issue for me. So for instance, I came in with an OCD diagnosis, very, very high level of OCD. And it crippled my life. And then during me sort of treatment at the gender clinic, they just said, I'm a trans person with OCD. The fact that you're trans and you have OCD are two separate matters. But for me, I become obsessed with the idea I was trans. And then when I started regretting surgery, they then used that OCD diagnosis to tell me that this was part of some sort of obsession and I wasn't really experiencing regret. So you can't really fucking win with these people. So I'm not saying that they're not mean. I'm just saying that they're like, they believe in it more than we do, right? Because they work in that profession. And I think that totally mars their perspective. Like, they're afraid to say, no, you might not be, or no, you may be. You know, you talked a lot about this internalized homophobia and growing up gay in a very, very constricted environment. Do you want to unpack that? No, it's all internalized transphobia and everyone says sexist. You must be a woman. Fuck me. Have some
They
hormones.
didn't have. Yeah, I get that, but remember, they didn't say, there was none of that language back when I was transitioning, right? There was none of that. I got pushback, though. I'll be honest, I got a lot of pushback. That's why I don't believe in affirmative therapy. I believe in therapy, and affirmative therapy is not therapy because you're not pushing back. You have to push back on somebody and say, well, all the things, being asked questions, and I got pushed back a lot. They didn't just hand me testosterone. It took me a year and a half of really hardcore therapy to even get a letter to go to the next step. And then that doctor questioned me, and then I got questioned until surgery happened. But that being said, I do think our experiences are going to be different, and clearly because I stayed this way and you didn't. So I think people need to see me and you, and understand what worked out for me and why didn't it work out for you. And this is why it's so important that we understand, why did it work out for me and why do I feel so happy, but why did it not work out for you? I think it's so important that we need to find that particular, something is not right there.
Yeah, agree.
I just jump in really quick. I just feel like bottom surgery is a big one because it's just not another surgery. That's what I've noticed. Like, literally, as a bottom surgery, and it says that on Blaire White project, like, that could literally make or break happy transition from disastrous transition. So I think but it's the biggest money maker for the surgeons. That's why it's like, that's the biggest profit margins right there with surgery. And like, I think it's really fucked up that people get to decide how far they want to take their transition, and there was no pushback. Nobody told me like, you can just leave, with your titties and your tucked dick and you'll be fine, There's almost like very much, for me, there was huge diminishing returns from the bottom surgery. And I don't really know from bottom surgery who is happy. All happy transitioners I know, they never had the bottom surgery. That's my experience.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Shape, 100%.
Yeah. If I could step in, I have another question that pertains to that, and maybe it's a good time to transition there. But I think with the you guys are all great talkers, and I love it. But maybe we should just not do these very long-winded openings. And just kind of free form it a little bit. But I had a question about surgery specifically, because one of the things that, as an outsider looking in, it seems that many of the detrans people, their aha moment is double mastectomy or vaginoplasty. And what it seems to me is that these surgeries, unlike androgen therapy, hormone replacement therapy, social transition, they have immediate consequences, right? And I think it is an immediate thing that shows some of the lack of informed consent that occurs within gender clinics. Is that, it's one thing when you're on HRT and you're in the ideology and you're making a transition, you're making a daily incremental steps. It's another thing when you have your breasts removed. It's another thing when you have to pump your I don't know, we'll call it, we'll use Keffel's term and we'll say neo pussy, right? When you have to pump up your neo pussy, right? In order to maintain its dilation.
No, you're banned, Scott, you're banned.
No, we already moved off to Twitch. If Keffel says it, I can get away with it.
You can say whatever
banning you.
You can say whatever Keffel says. But you get what I'm saying. You get what I'm saying, right? And so my question is to the detrans people is about that, but also I want to add this other element to the transgender people here that have not desisted in the social and kind of community pressures towards being, quote, true trans, right? This idea that like you would be a real trans person if you just had bottom surgery, but you're obviously not really committed to the role or committed to it. You're not a real trans person. And then you see this as well with the detrans population, where there's this element that says, oh, well, you were never a real trans person. You were never a true trans person. That's why these things, all these bad things happen to you. And like maybe there's some answer in the mixing up of the immediate effects of bottom surgery and double mastectomies, right? And how you feel, but feel free to just kind of take the field on this one.
Can I come in on the bottom surgery one?
Yeah, absolutely.
It took me. I knew I'd like pretty much. It's in my medical notes that I regretted it. Like first therapy session back into the gender clinic. In 2018, but it took us about 3.5 years to really recognize the full scale of what that meant, and that really woke us up in a way that I could not be awoken in any other environment, because it forced us to look at other people. It forced us to look at the longevity of surgery and to really take a step back and think about all the people I knew who had had it and what sort of results that they were living with. And it's like, I can maybe count on 1 or 2 fingers actually of how many people who have got like proper sensation. And it's just like, it's so savage, and everyone's, yeah, but it was better than before. And it's like, you've got no choice to say that. You've got no choice but to tell yourself the story that this is better than what you had before, because acknowledging anything else would be devastating. And it is devastating because, quite frankly, hand on heart, should not have ever had the surgery. I should not have done it, and I should not have been allowed to do it. And that's the bottom line.
So
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, to me, when I'm hearing this conversation about how, bottom surgery is often the make or break, and, I think what I keep thinking about is this idea of realistic expectations, right? And we kind of touched on that when it came to, pronouns used for people and what's reasonable and what isn't. And you kind of have to, before you transition, really have a conversation with yourself and ask what is reasonable. And for me, for whatever reason, and I would love to get the thoughts of people who went through with bottom surgery now and regret it as well. But for me, I kind of very quickly realized that there was just no reasonable expectation that I could ever have a functioning, healthy, actual vagina. Like, I remember thinking this. I remember thinking, okay, I can change my name, I can feminize my body, I can, do what I have to do, but there's clearly no way I could have a pussy. Like, I just knew it. And I don't know why some people don't have that conversation with themselves. And I think it's because the surgery is often just sold as something that it clearly isn't. And I think that if people realize that it's not a vagina, it is a neo-vagina, and it's a vagina that is going to have potentially problems, and it's never going to be the same thing, I think you'd have far less people going through with it. And I don't see my transition going any better because I had bottom surgery. I'm glad I
Sorry.
didn't do it. I have no plans to.
Sorry, Blaire, it's not even a neo vagina, just to come in there. Sorry, I'm
what
having
is
one
it?
or two.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, what did you say, Richie? To come in there?
Oh, fuck off. God, you're terrible.
Wait, what is it called then?
It's an inverted penis. You know, that's what it is. It's like neo vagina is new. Neo means new, like brand new. To say it's a new vagina would indicate that it is an actual functioning vagina. It's not.
Yeah,
It's,
that makes sense.
you know, or what it is it's a cavity that has. It's another way to access your prostate. Let's put it that way, and pee out of.
Right.
I mean,
that's it.
The point I was just making was
sorry,
that, like,
yeah.
even if you got optimal results, it will just never be what you want it to be, right? Which is like with other things like breast implants, it's like, yeah, they're gonna be breast implants, but like they're reasonably they are breasts, like, you know what I mean? But it's like vaginas, you can't make a vagina, you can't make a penis. I don't know why, I just kind of knew that early on, and I wish more people did.
And I think it goes back to like the debate or the discussion about the research on these topics. Because I think a lot of people are sold the idea that like they need these things and that like access for trans people to these things is the difference between life or death. And I think all of that language, it reinforces for people that like they're on this path and they have to do it. And there's no other option. And that's really dangerous. And I think it's really unique medical transition is because like if you're on Prozac for 2 years and you feel just as bad or worse, your depression hasn't improved, usually the solution isn't to like triple your Prozac dose, or you don't go like way further into what's not working. And I think that like what's sold to trans people is that like, oh, you're not feeling good, well, you just need to transition harder. And that narrative, I think, is not very productive.
I was definitely lied about the surgery, both by surgeons and everyone, including the community online, the trans community, because I didn't know at the time that there were some fetishists that are not homosexual, transsexuals, and their desire to transition is coming from a different place. And people were lying online saying how they're lubricating and they're having multiple orgasms. I could never understand that it was just a continuation of their fetish, you know?
Oh my gosh, we have to talk about that.
It's just insane expectation. And moreover, like surgeons says that like, oh, guys love neo vagina because it's tighter. They didn't tell me it's gonna be so tight that it's gonna be impenetrable, you know? So it was just like, they didn't know what the fuck they were doing, and they still don't. And everybody's like, you should use them, you should use them. Guys, what you don't understand, there is no specific definition of what acceptable results from vaginoplasty is or phalloplasty, and that's why there is exactly 0 lawsuits so far against surgeons. There's surgeons that watched so many people and their like office is still open, they're still doing surgeries everywhere, making money. It's purposely set up in a way so surgeons make money no matter what, with 0 repercussions. And WPATH and Marcy Bowers, they need to be investigated because they're constantly changing the language, constantly changing the standards. It's all down to evade lawsuits. It's all down to evade responsibility and accountability that you guys talk about. You know, nobody takes any accountability for anything. So
yeah,
it's
Blaire,
just like,
if you,
I'm so frustrated.
oh, I'm sorry, Blaire, if you want to step in, and then Chloe afterwards, because I know Chloe was trying to speak.
I'm not frustrated with you. I'm frustrated with the whole system, how like badly I was let down along with a lot of other detransitioners. And 100%, if I still had my penis or acceptable in your vagina, like, and to me acceptable would be to just spread my legs and get fucked. I would have been happy, but I'm unhappy and nobody cares. And I kind of have to put myself out there and get all this like massive amounts of hate, people telling me like all kinds of shitty things every day, that I'm this horrible person, that I'm just a gay drag queen, or I should have never transitioned, and saying things like I'm internalizing transphobia. Like, I was internalizing homophobia before, and now people are telling me I'm internalizing transphobia. So like, I can't win. And it's like, none of the surgeons that ruined my bodies are still like making money. You know, my first surgeon, he's 80 plus and he's still doing surgeries on people. Like, he's literally so greedy that he's still working in his 80s, like, to make money off his patients. And I feel like part of it is historically they operated on people who worked in the sex industry, and like, it was just very underground and nobody cared, you know, we were disposable. Now people don't care anymore. There's just bigger money involved. So there's just more people have access to surgeries because insurance covers it. So it's just like, it's payday for everyone, you know, like they don't care anymore for us than they did 20, 30 years ago. They maybe pretend to care more, but we're still disposable. And it's just like insane that I 100% believe that I was part of medical experiment. So
Yeah, Blaire, you wanted to jump in on the tightness.
I was actually just agreeing vocally with everything Shape was saying because he was going off and I loved it. So I wasn't trying to jump in. So whoever wants to talk next can talk.
Can I just
Yeah, go ahead, Chloe. Chloe,
Yeah,
I know Chloe's been
no,
trying
no,
to speak. Sorry.
Sorry, Chloe.
I wanna add to what Blaire was saying earlier. Well, you can't make like a proper replica of one set of genitalia, but you also cannot make functional breasts. Wow, she said, wow, you can make using implants or like other technologies like tissue grafting, you can make breasts that are reasonably visibly breasts. It's still not going to have like the function like say like being able to breastfeed a child. That's one of my concerns with that's one of the reasons why I can't get a reconstruction, because I mean, whether I get implants or tissue or fat grafted from other parts of my body, it's not going to bring back that function. I'm not going to be able to,
Right.
it's not going to bring back the sensation. I'm not going to be able to feed my children naturally once I have children. So it's really just not the same thing.
Right. I was just comparing that compared to bottom surgery, there tends to be like a lack of awareness of the extremity of it, where, you know,
Yeah.
at least like surgery to implant breast implants is something that's been done for so long and so much more than bottom surgery that there's going to possibly be less, you know, complications with that. Whereas, you know, when I hear about the male to female, specifically detransition stories, it's really the bottom surgery that gives them so much grief.
Yes, there's so much to lose with bottom surgery. There's so many processes that go on like within that area of the body that you just cannot replicate.
I think it's expectations too, because like millions and millions of cis women have had breast implants. Like, it is a known science. And so I think people have a lot more reasonable expectations when it comes to breast implants, because we know what they are. And yeah, it's hard because you kind of have to identify like who is going to benefit from these things and who isn't. Like Blaire White, Buck Angel, they've benefited from transition. They're happy people. They're doing well. And clearly, like, not everyone is like them. And I think that the whole goal should be to try to really rigorously find out like who is going to end up as Blaire and who is going to want to detransition, and stop them from transitioning far before they get to the point where they're having bottom surgery.
April, have you had bottom surgery?
I have not.
That's the difference between me, you, Shape, Blaire, Buck. You know, I mean, that is the fundamental.
yeah.
I probably could have continued living on in my little dream world as trans and pretending everything was all hunky dory. But the shit woke me the hell up in a way that I did not anticipate. Not just the physical shit. It was just crazy. And when you're trying to ask people about like, how is it? You've got to keep in mind they're all telling themselves a story too. And they're all in recovery, and they're all like trying to deal with the shit that they're putting up with. So you get stock responses like, yeah, it's okay. Oh no, I don't regret it. It's glad, and all this sort of thing. But the whole sort of what Shape was saying earlier about the lies, where people say, no, it self-lubricates, and you know, I'm like gushing rivers like out of me neo vagina. It's like, fuck off, oh yeah, you know what I mean? And it's when it comes down to it, it's like, you'll get some people who have, like, say, I can't remember what it's called. It's like the colostolectomy, the one where they use the bowel to leak the colon fluid. Like, yeah, you may have lubrication, but it smells like actual shit. That is not a good trade-off. Don't pretend that it is either. It's fucking vile. And, like,
yeah,
honestly, My surgeon, he's dead now. I didn't do it, by the way. But he died. I'm just saying.
Glad you clarified.
Yeah. Quote unquote COVID got him.
You're hilarious. You should totally do comedy.
That's a very strange way. Yeah, no, dude. My life is a tragedy.
Trans men. So trans men, it's the highest rate now of trans men going to get bottom surgery is now. I've never seen so many trans men going to get bottom surgery. Yet we all know it doesn't work. I mean, if you all know Scott Nugent, I think his name is, he's out there talking about how his surgery literally almost killed him. And that surgeon who did the bottom surgery on him did like 5 or 6 other botched bottom surgeries. He lost his license in California. You know what he did? He went over to Texas, opened up a new clinic, and is doing the same surgeries over in Texas. So it's just unbelievable. Like, nobody wants to hear it. Nobody in our community wants to hear it. Nobody wants to acknowledge it. You know, I got so much crap from this community early on when I talked about my vagina and I talked about being a man with a vagina. And I said, I don't need to get that surgery and I'm perfectly fine. Oh my God, I got so nailed from trans men. And then just move forward about 10 or 20 years later, all those trans guys are not getting bottom surgery. So there's this really weird way of being in our community where like people just don't want to be honest about stuff. They don't want to be honest about these surgeries, about detransitioners, about shit's going all haywire. We're all doing crazy shit because the medical world is pushing us into that space. And we really need to acknowledge that. You know, the medical world is not standing up and saying, no, we need to slow down here. They're saying, no, move faster. Everything is cool. This is all good. Yeah, exactly. Which that's why we need to hold them responsible because they're the ones who are putting out that message that says it's perfectly fine. Kids are fine. Puberty blockers are reversible. Don't worry. Like the nonsense that they're saying. And we're all sitting here going, what? That's just, but they're so powerful and they're so like they're in a way hypnotized. They're hypnotizing everybody. I really feel like everyone is on this weird they're hypnotized because nobody's standing up and saying that is not right and that is wrong.
It's a fucking psyop, bro.
Yep.
I think that it's even less about like we often talk about like these activists and professionals who push for kid trans surgeries, and we think like, how could they just sit there and lie, right? And we look at the results that people claim to have from their surgeries and say, why are they lying? But it's less about like lying to other people and it's lying to themselves. Like I've had trans friends who've gotten bottom surgery, and to admit to me that there was a complication, which would probably be the correct thing to do if someone who's also trans is asking you, about your honest truth, you probably should warn them, right? But instead, to admit that would be to admit that they have made a horrible mistake. And that's where the problem lies. Like every time I've ever asked, a trans woman who has had bottom surgery, like what happened? Does it work? What's the good and the bad, the ugly? They just kind of don't want to talk about it. And to me, it's like there's shame around it that needs to be dissolved as well.
So
I'm so glad you brought
Go
up
ahead.
that. I'm sorry, Fabian. Scott.
No, it's fine.
Shame rules so tremendously in the Detrans community. Like shame is the thing that drives people over the edge. It's the thing that drives them to end their lives and being unable to move forward too, because the errand or responsibility is all placed on the detransitioner rather than the people that facilitated them or the surgeon who didn't adequately care for them or just completely mistreat them, With the males, the shame is compounded because you have not only trans people and the general public, but you've got people in the so-called our side, as they say. There are no sides in this. There are factions, but there are no sides. And they'll say, you've got the love and embrace of all these gender critical people. It's not true. I do have a lot of support, and a lot of detransitioners have support, but we get vilified all the same on that side too. And, not everyone, part of being an adult is obviously realizing not everyone has to be your friend, of course, but the shame, it's so hard to speak out at the moment for any male detransitioner, and I see new accounts popping up and a post might explode and then the account's gone 2 days later because they're just getting absolutely hammered. And for me, it was like, you know, I don't really care what a bunch of lunatics on the internet say at this point, because I was one of them for a long time, like in the early days. Not like a TRA or now, it was just nutter on the internet. And it's like, I don't care what people online say to us. And I'm lucky that I've got that resilience because I've been using the internet since the late 90s, like 25 years, which is older than Chloe and probably other people in this chat. And that gives you a certain degree of resilience. But these people speaking out, especially the younger ones, who are the voices we need to hear the most, are the ones who are getting absolutely eviscerated from all sides. And my focus is trying to dispel that shame and trying to neutralize the landing for them a little bit, because they're the ones who take it to the next level, you know?
Yeah.
I want to pull apart that shame a little bit. And, you know, hopefully I'm not medicalizing anything here or, you know, armchair psychology, you know, but I do want to talk about this a little bit. And one of the things that it seems is kind of the science is refusing to acknowledge is massive standard deviations above the mean of normal individuals that are within, that are presenting for gender reassignment surgery, etc. Some data has it at like 80%, which is obviously just not true. Other studies have it much lower, but what we see is a massive amount of cluster B personality disorders, predominantly narcissistic personality disorder and borderline personality disorder. And one of the things that is also doesn't have a lot of research, which is the combination of the two. There are a few people that have looked at these, and it's usually referred to as vulnerable or covert narcissistic personality disorder, which is very different from grandiose personality disorder, right? Grandiose is basically Trump, right? I'm the greatest in the world. We're the best doctors. I mean, come on, right? But vulnerable covert narcissism is this idea of I am always a victim. Everyone else is oppressing me. I'm special. And if you don't reinforce my specialness and my victimness, right, then you're no longer giving me narcissistic supply. And if you're not giving me that narcissistic supply, you're actually evil. You're wrong. I must go after you. And it seems like this is incredibly, not only is it high in the trans community, but even more so in like the trans rights or trans radical activist community. We see this behavior from the people that are the most active voices within the trans community. And it seems to mesh very much with critical gender theory, which is this gender ideology tells people that, well, you are a victim, you're an oppressor, and the oppressive structure known as heteronormativity and the idea of gender and sex is the, you know, and the cis individuals are maintaining the superposition. And so looking at all of that shame and looking at the fact that you're immediately vilified and attacked, this, you know, all of the love is immediately pulled from you the moment you go against the narrative, which for some people I see as a narcissistic supply, a narcissistic fantasy. What level do you think that plays? Because the research is obviously not there. And why are we not talking about these comorbidities of cluster B personality disorders? Is it a chicken and the egg scenario? Which one's creating which? Or are they simply just correlated?
Yeah, I would say there's some correlation, but when you look at personality disorders, they normally stem from attachment issues. For instance, an unstable individual with unstable personality disorder, which is the old like the new name for borderline, they will normally have a BPD parent too, or a narcissistic parent, or maybe both.
Anxious avoidant is like fucking like number one sign you're gonna have BPD, right?
But you know, it's like, how important is that in the whole grand scheme of things? You know, there might be some causality there that is very interesting to look at, but for now, I think that is very much a subversive point where the issues are so much more severe than that. That will probably come next. And also when you're describing it, I was like, oof, I feel personally attacked. When you were talking about like the narcissism, like, and the perpetual victim, and I'm just like looking at my Twitter going, fuck. You know, I was like, is this me? Have I just done another narcissistic turd? But there is a degree. There is a degree of narcissism in all form of activism, because you are saying that you've suffered in some way, which, you know, I think I do, but I'm not bleeding my heart out like, oh my God, this is the worst thing ever. And I do have moments, but I think people can understand that and not pathologize like pain and grief, which a lot of people have got quite a right to. And when it comes to the trans side, which is what you're alluding to, that you've got this entitlement to be a victim because of the critical gender stuff, that also comes in with, well, there might be something underneath that. And I'm not saying that every person who claims a special has got like issues, but yeah, sorry, I'm rambling.
I wanna add to what you were saying earlier about the shame. I mean, the very act of detransitioning is just, it's very shameful in itself. I mean, admitting that you were wrong several years after the fact, all the dedication, all the money that went into that, and years later you just have to admit to your friends, your family, everybody around you that you were wrong, that you have this grief, that you regret this. And I mean, almost immediately, I mean, in my experience, as soon as I started expressing regret, not even that I was detransitioning, I was just bombarded with hate. I would have people just tell me to shut up and just stop talking about this, and I was told that I wasn't doing any good. I was just making everybody uncomfortable, at least online, like in trans spaces. And for a while, actually, I didn't have the resilience to speak up. I just kind of like caved into their demands and just stopped speaking about this for a while. It took quite a bit for me to rebuild that courage to speak out and just talk about my experience.
Well, I appreciate so much you guys sharing this, because I think with what Fabian's saying too, like, it really hits on how bizarre and cold like the trans community can be in a way that like other medical minorities really aren't. Like, you know, the example that I gave earlier was like Prozac. If you go on Twitter and you're like, Prozac didn't work for me, whatever, like that's an opinion that you can have. You can express that. And there aren't like, you won't be swamped by people who are like pro Prozac telling you like, fuck you, I can't believe like you had this experience. But like we do have that in the trans community. And I think it does speak to just how like connected it's become to a certain ideological project. Like,
yes.
And if it was just a medical question, we wouldn't have that issue. And I think that's why I'm so frustrated by like the left wing, especially like the progressives, who have like taken up trans people as like a pawn in their culture war. And they've like used us as a bludgeon. And it's to the detriment of us, because it's no longer a medical question. It's a question of like gender politics, which personally I don't like agree with them on. And so I think it's just like totally at its core rotten because of that in a lot of ways.
I think a lot of people nowadays takes a trans identity to get attention online because it's a hot label. To me, it wasn't that. I really felt like I was like a transsexual person. I need to have surgery, and I wanted to just move on with my life and live styles. And honestly, when I came online talking about like being detrans, I was in a very dark place. I didn't like, the reason I didn't feel shame anymore, because I just didn't think I was gonna make it out alive out of this whole situation. I just felt like ideology took so much from me. Like it took my family, my body parts. I just felt like I had nothing to lose. So that's why I kind of overcame that shame. I mean, who wants to talk about genitals online? Like nobody, especially when things didn't go right. I just felt like I've had it. That's why I started talking about it. But in a way, it also felt freeing finally to not hold all this within me. And despite all the hate, I've also gotten a lot of support, so it helped me a lot. And Chloe, you're brave as well, and everyone who like spoke
Yeah.
about their issues are brave because we are getting so much hate, like it's insane. And I feel like a lot of
Honestly.
people are very young, and I know that in a few years they're gonna come back to this like posts that were sending us hate, and they're gonna feel foolish because eventually you cannot hide the body count, and in our case, the transitioners are the body count. And yeah.
I so strongly relate to what you said about the whole I was gonna do myself in any so I may as well sort of speak out. And then the most unexpected thing happened that I found a new life and a new way out and a way forward. And I was like, oh, I just went all cards in. I just went, fuck it. I'm going to tell everyone everything. Fuck it. Whatever. Poof. All in. And now it's like, actually, I'm doing something that is good. And I'm part of something that I feel is fundamentally good. And I'm like, fuck. I've got to like plan for the future again. This sucks ass. Well, it kind of doesn't because I'm like happy that I've got a way forward because it's led on to a new set of like what do I really want in 5-10 years time? It's something I wasn't thinking about last year. I was just thinking about this. I'm done. That's what I was thinking. That's what we've all been there. And once you get through the other side, and once you unlock that I don't give a fuck anymore, you become so formidable. And it is so great. It's such a good feel, and it's like, you really can't do anything to us. Go fuck yourself. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for me, it was like, I mean, for a while, I knew that I wanted to speak out on this, especially because I knew that, like, as a minor, there's not many people in my situation who are really speaking out on this, and that my voice is going to be needed at some point. I didn't really know how to go about that though for a while. I didn't really have the strength to do that, and it wasn't until that I realized that I may have lost all my friends in person over this, and it wasn't until that I started making new friends who would support me, and that I realized that I had the support of, you know, like my older brother and my extended family, that I realized I can do this. And I mean, I don't know who else is going to do this, so it might as well be me. And I hope that in doing this, I can encourage other people in my situation to speak up as well.
You know, I support detransitioners. I'm sure you all know that, and I speak a lot about you, and I really feel you in my heart, and I put that into the universe and out into the world, and I get nowhere near probably what you get, but I get so much hate from the trans community for supporting you, which says everything about this fake ass community. It's fake. It's not community. Community says, oh my gosh, one of ours is not good. You are, as far as I'm concerned, my friends, you're all part of this community. You will never not be. No matter how and what you choose to do, you will always be a part of this community. And that's why I support your choice of detransitioning. But that being said, I just want you to know that even people like myself get nailed for even supporting or even hearing you or even saying we need to have a discussion around this, that we're just not allowed to talk about that. That's what the whole world needs to see. If it was a healthy, forward-looking community that actually cared about what it has done for a person like me, they would care about you too. So I'm telling you, it is a narcissistic community. It's based all on narcissism. It's based on me. It's all about me. When they try to pretend like it's about us, it's not about us. It's literally individual space in this thing. And if you go against what they are doing, so my question always is to the world, well, how come detransitioners don't affect me? How come I feel sad for them? And how come I embrace them? I don't push them away. How come you don't have any effect on my transition in any way, shape, or form? That's where I say there's something amiss here, and there's something fake going on in this community, because you should have never had this happen to you. And here we are just pushing you away like you don't count. But I want to know that you all count, and your voice is heard. And it will be heard higher as we elevate your voices, because, you know, again, I'm going to tell you, if it wasn't for you guys, this thing will spiral out so bad. We need your voices. So I thank you.
Can I ask Blaire, what sort of
Yeah.
sorry, Shape, I think we'll get a little bit of feedback there. Oh, never mind. It's gone. Blaire, what sort of reception, because you've been interviewing detransitioners for like a year or 2 years now. Like, what sort of, even recently to like say our interview, what's the reception been?
Yeah. So I have been interviewing detrans people for the past few years, correct? But interestingly, I started talking about this topic as a whole, like way back in the day, like maybe like 2017, I believe was my first detrans video. And just because I started seeing this bubbling like at the surface, right? It was nowhere near at that point the explosion it is now, to where there seems to be a whole community of you guys and, you know, a unified message that didn't exist even in 2017. There's just a few people on the internet telling their stories, but even at that point, it seemed like more than usual, because when I began my transition, there were virtually none. So I think that I do get a bit of a pass, because this is one of those things that I was, you know, technically correct early on, because I kept saying this is going to get way worse. You know, I get a ton of hate from like trans people, obviously. You know, I have a center right audience, and so they're not mad, but you know, there are a lot of people within the trans community that have this expectation that I should shut up and not talk to you guys. And you know, I just find it disgusting, because you know, we touched on this in the interview with you, Richie. It's like, to me, I see nothing but positive things happening for trans people as well, to allow detrans people to speak up, because I have personally learned so much talking to you guys and listening to you guys about my own transition and my own medical journey. Like Richie was talking about several different side effects with HRT that I literally didn't know. And so for me to be, you know, almost 7 years into my transition and not know certain things like that, because there are no medical professionals willing to just be honest or do the work to tell me that, you know, I think it's very telling. So I will always talk to you guys, especially so long as the mainstream media won't, you know. And I think that what you guys are doing for trans people is beneficial, and for detrans people, it literally helps everyone. So of course people have to be mad, but I just see no downside to you guys talking.
Bless you. You definitely need to have Chloe on if Chloe's up for speaking.
Yeah, Chloe. Come on.
Yeah.
So it seems like I want to let's.
I know,
It's
we
probably
were in
the
contact
last
a
one
couple
for the
weeks
night.
ago.
So this is probably like last major question, but I want to go back to maybe a softer question, and you know, well, maybe not softer, but less emotional, right? And that is that this has become a culture war, and it's very obvious. The trans community has been used as weapons and tools by both sides. And, you know, maybe I have a unique perspective as a libertarian, because we're like super focused on rights, whereas, you know, the left has been consumed in this critical theory, this postmodernist, this deconstructionist philosophy that is so damaging. But the other thing that I see, that I fear, and that I really genuinely fear, is that it's a really complicated, complex thing. And so many on the right, the more you say like, well, the APA is corrupt, the AMA is corrupt, WPATH's corrupt, UNESCO at the United Nations is corrupt, CICUS in terms of your education is corrupt, your public schools are corrupt. The more that they learn about these things, and then you add in Sexual Citizenship for Children by Evans or Gail Rubin, and these things that they really fear, the more I'm worried that you're going to see far more things like Texas saying, if you're under 21, you're not getting HRT, period, even though you can get college loans and you can fight in war. The more I'm worried that the right's reaction to this is going to be, this is so fucking complicated. Let's just burn it all to the ground and fuck trans people, because you people can't be trusted with our kids. You're going against our values, which are, you know, family and the nuclear family and our children. And I wonder, how do you guys that have lived through this, that are in many ways aligned with the right in this culture war, because the left has gone so crazy on this issue, how do you protect yourself, and how do you navigate a space where you're worried that the more education about these issues and corruption might lead towards a radical right-wing shift in the other direction?
Sorry, Blaire, did you want to say this?
Yeah, so I'm pretty much the quintessential trans on the right person in the chat. I
Right.
don't even think Buck identifies as Republican. I've registered Republican, voted Republican my whole life. So I have, I think, a pretty unique understanding of how the right views trans people simply because I'm a trans person with a right-wing audience, at least for the most part. And the thing about it, which is probably not a no-brainer, is a lot of them say they just didn't get it until they came across my channel because they didn't separate trans people from leftist ideology, right? And so I think that the more trans people are out there willing to speak with nuance and not be such a collectivist and not be part of such a hive mind, the more people get it, right? I think that I've been really impressed with sort of how the detrans community and as someone who's observed them from not being a thing to being such a thing now, I'm really impressed with the unified message. I very rarely see any detrans people, especially the more so public figure examples, several of which are in this room. I don't ever see them saying the entire concept of trans should be burned to the ground and adults shouldn't get the right either. And I think that has been so key because adults should be able to do what they want with their body. If anyone has the audacity to tell me that I should have never gotten the surgeries I've gotten or chose the life I chose, like, fuck you. But it's a different conversation when you're talking about kids. And so is there going to be a pendulum shift to the right? It's already happening. But I think that all we can do is continue to speak to both sides with as much nuance is required to tell the truth, right? Because oftentimes we don't tell the truth because you have to work through so much to get there. It's like, who wants to have the conversation with a right-wing Republican that, you know, all these nuances and differences? They couldn't listen to this live chat, you know, if they tried, at least most of them. It's too much, you know? But if they see trans people on the right, if they see detrans people saying, you know, no, this isn't about adults' freedom to bodily autonomy. This is about kids being abused. This is about people not being properly diagnosed. We just have to keep that consistent message, you know, and we can have differences along the way. And, you know, we don't all agree on the same things all the time, but just being real about it because no one else is being real about it.
Yeah, definitely.
You're so right. You know, I've been asked to go on. I only get asked to speak to the right. I mean, you know, Fox News, like TP USA, like they're the only ones that ask me on the platform. The left does not. The liberal media won't even have me on. So, okay, that's cool with me because I don't even care. They're not even wanting to listen to this. At least that side, the conservative people want to. You know, I've made so many conservative friends from being on those and really what Blaire said, being honest. Literally being honest about who and what I am. The minute I say I'm a biological female, this is why I needed to do it. I live an amazing life. And they see that, they're like, oh, because what they're seeing over there is wing nutty and insane. And anybody would be totally freaked out if they saw what was going on over there. Like, just, of course. So it's important for us to step up like we are and saying, hey, wait a minute, that does not represent me. And that's not what all trans people are like. And that's not, again, we're going to use that word nuance. It is such an important word when it comes to all of this conversation. But as far as I'm concerned, the right, whatever you want to call them, the conservative, the people who hate us, I feel less hate from that side than than that side. That side hates me more than ever. And I am a liberal. I'm an actual liberal. And I'm just like, nope, I cannot even be around that because they won't have the conversation. You know, they won't say, okay, well, wait a minute here, Buck, let me hear it. My own community hates me, which should, again, say a lot because I'm willing to talk to the people they keep saying are haters. And the minute you speak not in their language, they immediately call you they call me right wing all the time. But I'm like, hold on, wait a minute. No, I'm not. And that's not fair for you to put that label on me when you're not even hearing what I'm trying to say here. So that side, that left woke, whatever you want to call it, they're making it so we can't have these conversations. They don't want you to have these conversations because when we have these conversations, what comes out of it is people are like, oh, we see what's happening here. They don't want people to see what's happening here. So that being said, I believe that speaking to the enemy, which I don't, is the way to create a space where all of a sudden now we have a more nuanced conversation and now people can see what's really going on in this community because they don't really know what's going on.
And
I relate a
also,
lot.
Can I come in?
All right, hold on. Blaire, then April, then Richie.
okay. I just want to say, like, maybe we deserve for a little bit of a pendulum shift to the right on this issue. If there are 12-year-olds getting their breasts cut off, just saying, like, we
Yeah,
talk about
right.
this pendulum shift to the right as if it's going to be something totally terrifying. Maybe it just means we're not cutting off breasts with 12-year-olds. Maybe it just means we're not sterilizing kids before they can get driver's licenses. And if that's the case, I don't really care. Also, frankly, like, what am I supposed to be afraid of as a trans person on the right? That they're going to make it some new bathroom laws that affect adults? I've never had an issue in a bathroom in my entire life. Even before I transitioned, I used the women's restroom because they just looked like a girl. No one cared, you know? I'm not particularly afraid of this pendulum shift. And if it saves one child from having the inability to have kids because of these woked out idiots who are making these decisions for them, then you know what? Bring on the pendulum shift. I don't care.
Yeah, just echoing a lot of what people are saying. I have good conservative friends. My family tends to be very conservative. I grew up in a conservative area and I connect with these people fine. And I'm able to talk with them and they're able to show me empathy. And I think that like the reason why they're able to do that is because when I come to them, I'm very realistic about things. I'm very honest about things. And I don't try to play like these games with them. Like I just speak like, this is what it is. Like I want to present in a way that looks female. Like I don't say that like, you know, I'm becoming a female or anything like that. And I think that's what they connect with. Like when you're willing to like throw away the ideology and just speak to them heart to heart in language they understand. And so like, the extent that I fear like a right-wing pendulum shift, like I think we've gone so far to the left in so many ways that like what Blaire is saying, that like we can't afford to go a little bit, we can afford to get a little bit more conservative with these things. I do think that like, you know, theoretically we can go too right with these things. And that would worry me eventually for sure, because I think that like there is a scientific truth about like whether or not HRT is good. And we can discover that. And that shouldn't be like something that is based on politics. That should be based on medical data at the end of the day. And so it worries me when these things are politicized. But I do think that like to an extent, getting a little bit more conservative with these things, you know, maybe less double mastectomies for 14-year-olds is probably a good thing. So yeah, I'm not super worried about the right-wing shift right now. I think it could get scary in the future, but I think it's just a matter of speaking to people really honestly and really heart to heart and developing that empathy.
The problem we have is a lot of people get caught up under this new expanded trans umbrella, you know, was along with we lost definition of a woman, trans woman, drag queen, we lost all this definition. Nothing means anything anymore. And I think that's a main danger and problem, because all these people who 10 years ago would have just been drag queen or just like cross-dresser or something, they're all getting caught up and they're thinking they're trans. And I think that's why we have so many transitioners and also detransitioners and people who regret transition. You know, and I feel like the whole idea of transgender just a novelty thing. When I was transitioning, I was transsexual. You know, I wanted to pass as the opposite sex, you know. And now some people are not even trying to pass. They don't look like anything and they just took the trans labels. That's why everyone hates trans people at this point, you know, because a lot of friends I know, they identify as transsexuals, like Buck, you know, they trying to pass as an opposite sex. That's how it's been for years, you know. And now we have all these people who like not even trying to do anything. They're just adopting identities and accessing all the space they have no business being in. They're waving their dicks in front of people. They're embarrassing us, you know, like transsexual community. Like, and I think that's like a new trend people are trying to start online. People who are like transsexuals, they're not transgenders. They're trying to do away with this whole like gender ideology. So I hope that will save certain people who could definitely benefit from medical transition. But again, this should be just a few people from what I can tell. That's like people who really experience this discomfort and they do want to pass as a stereotype. I mean, people talk about stereotypes. Yes, I get it. Like, I look like a bad stereotype of a woman. I get it. But that was my choice. And if somebody wants to look like a big boobied Barbie doll, like, it should be their right, you know? And if they do that, like, and they're passing as a stereotype of opposite sex, then they can use the restroom if they're not waving their dicks, you know, in front of women, then kudos to them, you know. But I'm afraid because things gone so far that even those few may lose their rights. So I agree with Scott on that, like, that, because I do have friends who are, you know, they've transitioned, they look like a stereotype of a woman, and they're happy, you know. They're living their lives the best they can. You know, a lot of them are in sex work, whatever they're doing, but they're not bad people. They're trying to do the best they can with what was the cards that they've been dealt, you know? And it's like, if they weren't allowed to live their lives as is right now, their situation would have been way worse, you know? And sometimes I'm worried that my activism can take away from those people, you know? But I'm trying to be friends with based trans people, such as Blaire, such as Ubak, you know? They're kind of close to us, to the trans community, you know? So we're all in this together. Thank you.
I believe in you, Richie. Yeah, go.
Thank you. There is left and right. These are distractions. You know, somebody might be a little bit more left than they are right, but fundamentally, the real inequality is what's up and what's down in terms of wealth inequality. Right? And I'm not saying that as little socialist. I'm saying that because
shut up, commie.
That is the major distraction at play here. You know, we've had gender identity politics thrust upon us at around the time that we had Occupy Wall Street and 2011, 2012. That's when it really started escalating. And now we're all at each other's throats. We're no longer thinking about all these bankers who got off with the financial crash of 2008 and no one ever accounted for it, and how that even today with inflation and these may seem like very boring, mundane topics to a lot of people, but this is where we're at. This is where we've got. And yes, we need to solve this issue, but let's go back to the core. Let's go back to what we were really talking about before this thing distracted us and took everyone and captured everyone on all sides. And also, I will say that what a lot of trans people need to understand, and I think you guys understand it, is when the pendulum does shift as it is, the only chance you're going to have at a seat at the table is with detransitioners, because they're the ones who are going to be who are going to be called on. We're already getting advice swung our way and stuff like that. And it's important that we'll have a united front on this, and that doesn't mean that detrans integrates into trans. That means that they come to us, they listen to us. The tables have certainly turned now. It's not that we are serving and behest to trans will be behest to the detrans community. It's just the way the dynamic is shifted. And I'm not being vindictive, but they really do need to get on board. They really do. Because we could really do some good things, but they need to acknowledge certain facts about minors taking HRT, about the risks associated with it, about the efficiency and longevity of surgery. You know, they're going to have to swallow some of these bitter pills. Anyway, that was my rant.
Well, everybody seems to be here. We can do outros and stuff if you would like, or we can throw the spiciest question out there. What do you guys think?
I want to hear it. I want to know the spicy question.
All right, fair enough. There always seems to be an elephant in the room when speaking about trans and detrans people that a lot of people really don't want to talk about. We talk about the medical, we talk about the science, the pseudoscience, we talk about the theory, but a lot of trans people have been targeted at young ages online, unknown to their parents, and have found validation, usually from other men that are sexual predators, that have targeted these people and have made them feel special and unique via their sexual attraction towards the idea of them and the idea of them transitioning. And it seems that a lot of detrans people, even brave people that want to talk about these things, don't want to talk about this because it points a light on them as a degenerate or a bad person or gross or sick. And we can't talk about some level of victimization that occurs online for people. You know, I've seen it and we hear about it. And when you speak out against it, normal people will come out and attack you and say, oh, this was a one-off thing, or, oh, what are you talking about? Discord servers aren't rampant with fucking creepy pedophiles coming after fucking kids. And it's not true.
I'm not sure I agree with you on that one because I myself and a few
Please
others
go.
have been speaking about the grooming situation. You know, I like if I could, I would say
fair enough, yeah.
groomer every single day on Twitter, but I need to keep my account active, right? I've already
Of course.
suffered a 12-hour ban for it, and it's like I would love nothing more than to describe the process that happened to me as a child and a teenager online. And the process that is rampant on the internet, you know, like the internet in the 90s and 2000s was a very fucked up place, and it's still a fucked up place now. You know, men made the internet, they run the infrastructure, they were like, and this isn't just a sexist thing, just a sexist thing. Don't mean to be sexist is what I meant to say.
Let's be honest, it's mostly dudes, right? I mean, like,
it is literally all guys. Like, and yeah, of course, it's natural going to happen. But I disagree that this isn't an elephant in the room that people aren't discussing. I think it's getting discussed. I think we even discussed it in our interview. So
a little bit.
4
yeah.
out of 10. 4 out of 10 for spiciness in that one. I'm disappointed.
Well, I know. I'm sorry. It's just there are a lot of spaces where you said you want to keep your account, and so people don't. It's something that you just don't. You hear mentioned, or you hear in passing, or there's like a wink, like, hey, we know this is a thing, but it's not extrapolated. It's not expanded. It's not really talked about.
If I could jump in,
of course.
I think I kind of have it figured out, and feel free for anyone to disagree with me on this, but if you look at how pedophiles move, right, they often seek out positions that are sort of like you can't critique them, which is why for all of history they became priests and religious figures and cult figures. They want this impenetrable shield of criticism so they can prey on kids and prey on minors. They see that with the LGBT community because they've seen the way in which, you know, gay rights, trans rights, the LGBT community have really come up, and it's by accepting no criticism. It's by doubling down always. It's by canceling and ruining people who go against your agenda, right? That is a perfect cover for pedophiles. What better cover could there be? And so they see that we double down on everything, and they're like, okay, if we just sneak in, they'll be doubling down on defending us as well. And a lot of people do it unknowingly. You know, I think a lot of people in the community have no idea the kind of stuff that goes on, you know, and maybe they see these viral videos of like drag queen story hour and like kids touching the thongs of performers and stuff, and maybe they're not really seeing that because of the algorithm difference. You know, we're tuned into a different algorithm, but these pedophiles know that there's no better cover in 2022 than just calling yourself LGBT.
The Kevin Spacey defense, basically.
Right.
Yes. God, did Kevin Spacey get away with sexually harassing and potentially assaulting multiple people just by being like, oh, I'm gay, right? Like,
It's
we're good.
real, though.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to speak on because I don't have personal experience with this, but there definitely, there's definitely like instances where people will point out really bad behavior, and then you'll hear like, I don't know, there's like a specific person who has been in drama recently regarding this, I think, and they're on Twitch, and people don't really want to like talk about it or call it out because
grooming cunt.
There's this like, well, they're so good for the trans community, so.
Oh, fuck. Oh, God. Oh, God. This is going to end up on Rumble after this? Like, oh, God. Oh. Please continue. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, I don't know. It's hard for me to say because like all of these scenarios, almost by nature, they're like very secretive. They're very hidden. They're very in the shadows. So it's like, it's always going to be difficult to provide like a smoking gun for these sorts of things. But I think that like part of the reason why that is because people just aren't willing to like look really. And the people who are like the most willing to look, most willing to peer through those corners are the people who are like not invited to the groups or they're not in them. So yeah, it's hard to kind of dissect, especially if you're on the outside, like a lot of us are.
Well, that's why I
was for
joined the
sure
group.
agree.
It's why I joined the group Gays Against Groomers. Honestly, I actually connected with them because I believe it's insane. But I don't have personal experience with it, but I've been on the internet a long time. And I also remember I work in the adult entertainment business, which is a very difficult space for me to be in right now because of a lot of stuff that's happening. So, you know, it's I see it and I know it's happening out there. And I think Gays Against Groomers and those kinds of organizations that are starting to really bring this to the forefront so people can see, because a lot of people don't even understand this is happening. And so I think even grooming young people into being trans, that's totally happening. There's no
Right.
doubt in my mind. I have friends who are detransitioners who told me all those stories that they were literally groomed into it. And
Just like put on a path.
that's right. It needs to be a conversation, but every time you even try to talk about it, or being connected to Gays Against Groomers makes me transphobic. So we started Trans Against Groomers. Okay, then we'll just start another one.
It's pretty great.
Base.
You should
I'm
just
not gonna
call
lie,
it.
base.
You could just call it like trans against keffels or gays against keffels, and it would still
Well, the
work.
fact that we
wouldn't it?
have words that like are like pink pilling people, it's like so like don't that's like so scary. Like you should not be trying
Egg.
to like medicalize people who are like innocent children. Yeah, I don't know. It's really, I think it's really scary for sure.
Did you want to say something, Chloe?
Also, like it totally allows people to like you're just playing into like every bad stereotype. Like I think that we have to really police our own community and like prevent these people from adopting the language of civil rights or of our medical stuff to protect themselves and to use us as a shield, because ultimately what they're doing is they're putting us in front of them. So when the bullet comes, like it's hitting trans people and not them. And that is just horrible.
Can I just come
I was
in
gonna
on
say-
that with a serious? Sorry, Chloe, you've been waiting
No,
to speak. You go
yeah,
first.
Chloe goes.
Yeah, I was gonna say one of those words would be egg. So for those of you who don't know, an egg is basically it's like a slang term amongst trans people for like a closeted trans person, basically. So, an uncracked egg, a person who
Because you have to
hasn't,
hatch, right?
yeah, it's
Oh my gosh.
creepy to say the least.
Yeah.
And people will be
Never
like,
even heard
I've
of that.
cracked like 30 eggs. Like people will like brag about it
Yes.
and count it. And it's
Oh
like,
my God.
this should not be the goal. Like
Nobody-
if you
Nobody wants to talk about how many eggs I've scrambled, though. You know, you're all out there
The
breaking
metaphor,
eggs.
yeah.
Yeah, man, scrambling them eggs. I can't even remember what I was
That
going to
is
say
crazy.
before. It's 3:30 now, Scott. I'm pretty tired, so I think I'm gonna
Yeah.
cut
Well,
soon.
I
I
want-
do- I do
well-
have a bit.
I'm
Yeah,
gonna go
let-
with
I do
let-
have a
let
bit
Chloe
more to
and-
add.
Let Chloe and Blaire speak a little bit, and then we'll do outros and go ahead and wrap it up so that we're not missing anything. It's been a great time, but Chloe, go
I'll
ahead.
keep it brief. I have never heard of the phrase crack an egg, so that's really depressing that that's a thing.
Absolutely.
And I think it's pretty ironic that the same people who use phrases like that will in the same breath say that the concept of a social contagion is a false premise or not happening, but they have literally a phrase for the social contagion. I just thought that's funny, so.
So I wouldn't say that this kind of like pressure or grooming was what got me into transitioning in the first place. It was more like I just kind of had like unfiltered internet access from a very young age and a lot of like comorbidities. But like as I like got further into my transition, I got involved in like trans spaces. I had like a lot of older either trans identified or identifying as like gay or bisexual like adults who would like reach out to me to like try and like have like conversations with me in like a suggestive manner while I was still a minor. There was a lot of that in these spaces.
Wow.
I mean, you're talking about a population of people likely requires validation online, because you're not going to get a ton of validation from family that doesn't quite understand it. So you're seeking out people that understand you, and it is the perfect place for predators to claim that they understand and I don't want to say target you, but yeah, target you. And you know, we had our own kind of drama situation with fuck it, I'll just say it, Queen Alexa, when we got them the first time, and I gave stuff to the Crucible and to Andrew, and then you know, they came back and the entire Twitch community was like, Queen Alexa's great. And I was like, Doobie, have you seen this shit? He told a 17-year-old girl in a voicemail that once she turned 18, he was gonna, or sorry, trans girl, once she turned 18, he was gonna bend her into a pretzel and fuck the shit out of her, and admitted it to a bunch of other people. And that was what they did in an open voicemail. Like, why the fuck is this person like accepted in the Twitch space and running panels and things like that? And you know, it's difficult to verify because you hear, like, it's always these whispered rumors of like, oh, this happens in the server. It's like, is it all made up bullshit because people want to, you know, talk about drama and they're just kind of overemphasizing it? But then again, I've heard the term egg plenty of times before too. It's like, you know that that's a literal thing. And the other thing that I find so interesting about the social contagion question and the eggs and things is, if social contagion isn't true, then what the fuck is a true trans? Because if there is a true trans and there are people that are not true trans, then you admit that there are people that are swept up in social contagion. You don't get you don't get to have your egg and you don't get to have your eggs and eat it too, right? Like, right. You know, if you will, right? Like, so I don't know. I don't know what to say other than my limited experience as someone that's not in the community and hasn't been in these spaces, but have seen and heard the whispers and rumblings, suggests to me that a part of this solution has to be parents understanding that these online spaces are way fucking darker than you think they are.
Yes.
Can I come in and talk about why I theorize why a lot of trans people won't call out like really shitty behavior within the community, whether it's the local or it's what's happening online? And it's this whole sort of, there's this hidden silent agreement not to criticize someone. So for instance, if you were to share a photo of yourself as a trans person in a trans space, the unspoken agreement is nobody gives you shit for that photo. So you can pretty much share. Yeah, no matter what, doesn't matter what you look like, you look great. So the second that you start critiquing people, no matter how bad it is, that opens up criticism to you and to others around you. And I think it's really unhealthy. Social shaming, like, it has a purpose. It keeps people on the straight and narrow. If you do something really daft and people make fun of you, like, oh yeah, actually that was pretty stupid, you know what I mean? But sorry, I don't want to belay that point too much. That will also sort of serve as my outro as well, which is, yeah. Thanks for having me on, Scott, and it's been great being in the same room with all of you as well.
Yeah, this is amazing. It's nice to meet you, Blaire, even though, you know, we didn't see you. We heard you, all right? And that's what's important about voices, that they be heard, all right? And it was nice meeting you as well, Chloe. But let's actually do like a proper outro at this point, because it is getting late for a lot of people. And since you have to go, Richie, we'll start with you. Let people know who you are, if you want people to follow you or anything as well, and just kind of, you know, surmise your, I don't know, if you need a quotable moment, now's the time for a quotable moment, but don't make it too long, boys.
Holy shit. Fuck furries. I hate them like to no end, you know, I'll say that again. You can follow me on Twitter at TullipR, that's TullipR, for more spicy hot takes. We'll see how long I last there before I get banned. I'm sure that'll come at some point. But that's me. Thanks for listening to my rambles. It's been a pleasure. But I am knackered. So I'm gonna have to go to bed because I've got work in like 4 hours. So
bye, Richie.
Hope my boss isn't watching.
Bye, Richie. It's nice talking to you again.
And you. Bye.
All right. Taff.
Can I go? Because I have to go like kind of right now.
Let's
Okay,
have
yeah, fair
Blaire
enough.
go.
Of course.
You can search me on pretty much any platform. Just look for Blaire White, and you can watch my crazy videos. Probably not with the volume too loud because I yell a lot. But bye, guys. Thank you so much for having me.
Bye.
Thanks for stopping by. All right, now you can go Taftaj.
Thank you, Scott. Yeah, Taftaj, if you search that, you will get my main big account. Be warned, I have like sexy pictures on there. I have a politics only account where I post lots of controversial right-wing trans takes, and that is Tafferisms, which it should be on Scott's screen if you want to go to that. But yeah, check me out. I do Twitch politics, I debate people, and it's a lot of fun. So thanks, guys.
All right, Buck Angel.
Hey, well, you can just basically Google me. Just kidding.
It's such a fucking flex. It's like, right? Like, this is like, just fucking Google me. Like, I'm known.
Me, dude. But be careful. Actually, Twitter, be careful.
Yeah, Sam. Be careful.
Twitter,
guys.
like, if you want to actually really, like, actually have a conversation, go to Twitter. I actually like Twitter. A lot of people don't like Twitter. I actually do because they they let me say stuff, that would probably get me kicked off of other platforms. And I'm pretty sure it's because I'm an old tranny. That's the only thing about being an old tranny is that I get some clout there. But that being said, you can find me on Instagram, all that. But please, reach out to me. Anybody who's listening or has this, if you have any questions or, I really appreciate you all. I do. It means a lot to me to have these conversations. So thanks, Scott, for bringing me on. And thanks for all you guys and putting this out there because I don't want to say when, but we're going to make change here and change that's really necessary. So thanks you all for having the conversation.
No, absolutely. Chloe, so nice to meet you. Happy to see you. Happy that, the younger Gen Z generation is speaking up as well. Go ahead and tell everybody about yourself.
I don't have a whole lot more to say than, pretty much everything I've already said already. I'm a young detransitioner, probably one of the youngest people out there speaking about this right now, actually. Right now, the only platform I really use is Twitter. You can find me on there at my at's kind of weird. CHOOOCOLE. Chukol. It's a nickname, so. But thank you so much for having me on here and giving me this opportunity to speak. Thank you for everybody else who came on here to speak, and thank you to everybody who is watching this and tuning in to listen to all of us right now.
Right. ShapeShifter. Hold on. Right,
So I'm on YouTube as Shape Space Shifter. I'm on Twitter as Shifter of Shapes, and I just recently did the Instagram account so I could be a part of Trans Against Groomers. So it's also Shifter of Shape. Yeah, thank you for having me. Honestly, thank you to all the base trans people such as April, Buck, and Blaire. Like, you guys are amazing because you're kind of close to the trans community. In a way, if I had more friends like you, I would have never had the bottom surgery. I would have definitely had people to check me and bring me back to reality, is that no matter what I do to my body, I will always be a biological man. And that knowledge could have really helped me a lot and saved my body parts. And I feel like I really feel a connection to like base trans people as a detransitioner myself. So yes, thank you for giving us a platform. This was like really amazing, and I felt like we had so many good conversations. It was like my favorite podcast, I guess, or whatever this panel. Thank you.
Well, thank you everybody that came. Well, I hope you guys have a great night. I hope you have a great week, and I appreciate everybody that stopped by. But my voice is basically almost gone, so we're gonna kick you out of here. You can stay in the Discord. You don't have to leave. Anybody that's in the Discord, don't you dare fucking harass any of these people, all right? And we're and Mark and I will have a little bit of a chat. Also, say hi to Mark. Mark is the silent co-host sometimes.
Hello.
Still silent.
You're not coming through.
Bye.
Every time I'm so bad with the mic. Damn it, Buck. You son of a bitch. I wanted to say thank you all for coming by. I am the silent partner, generally speaking, but it's very nice to see you all or meet you. For Chloe and ShapeShifter, it's very nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
A lot of fun, guys. I'll see you next time.
Right.
Not me.
All right. Well, that was fun. It sucks that we had to move off of Twitch because Taftaj's account was attacked. She thought she brought Mr. Girl on for like a second and then kicked him off. And she thought like, oh, it was my fault I did that. But apparently she was given a 3-day temporary ban for promoting sexual content, despite not understanding how she was doing that. And she doesn't have her OnlyFans linked or anything. So little suspicious, forced us to move over to YouTube. But I appreciate everybody that came over to the YouTube regardless. We'll get the full video kind of like uploaded, like re-uploaded, and then we'll take down this portion we'll probably keep them both up, or I don't know how we'll do it. We'll figure it out. But we can't raid anybody because we're not monetized on YouTube, because YouTube's not really our thing. And my voice is completely destroyed. So follow us at twitch.tv/Fabian or /Fabian Liberty.
We're live right now.
We're not live right now.
If you're watching this on YouTube right now, we are live on Twitch right now. Go to twitch.tv/Fabian Liberty. Come check us out. Give us a follow.
I mean, we're not, but I mean, fair enough. If it's past,
you can't prove that. You don't know that. You don't know when they're watching this. They could be watching it in our time block.
That's true. That's true.
To go to the Twitch. So you should go. You should just believe me and not this lying sack of shit to that side of me.
You pointed the wrong way.
Not on Discord. I didn't.
Fair enough.
On Twitch.
Yeah.
YouTube, whatever.
Well, yeah, on my screen. All right, boys, we're gonna get out of here, but I appreciate everybody for being here. It was awesome. I can't wait to get it like clipped and yeah, it should be a fun time.
That was a great panel. I hope we can put more together like it.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But again, see you tomorrow, Friday, 7 p.m. Eastern. We'll be live on Twitch.
I do it for you, little bits.
All right, goodbye. Did you have any final words, Mark?
Itadaki masu.